good morning, and yes, it is I, the conspicuous Moo, and I'm back again, this time with another set of beta patch updates. This has been a Conduit week, and a slight Covenant week. We'll get into all of the details. These are mostly nerfs, and there are a couple of buffs, and there's a decimal place missing in one of them as well, which is rather entertaining. So, let's get cracking. Finesse! The worst a monk can get. Yeah, it's sufficiently cheesy, but gets the message across anyway. As always, try and avoid finesse conduits if you possibly can. I know that you do get railroaded into some of them on some of the soulbinds, but anyway, this is the ranking, 1 to Watt. Watt's being worst, of course, and yeah, let's have a quick peek at these. They seem to have fixed Dizzying Tumble. At one point, the leg sweep component was included in it, so you would stun someone for 3 seconds, and then 3 of the 5 seconds they'd be doing 5% less damage. So really you'd only have 2 seconds on the end. It was a bit rubbish, but they appear to have fixed that, but they've also nerfed the Conduit now. I would still take this because, you know, if you've got a whole bunch of mobs who are hitting you rather hard, at the end of the day, you know, the 5% is not going to make much difference, but further down the line, a 12% damage reduction for 5 seconds after they come out of leg sweep, you know, I've seen worse. In fact, I can see worse on this screen. Tumbling technique is annoying because it's a proc chance, and generally speaking, tanks don't like proc chances because it'll proc when you don't want it to. And you know, you're going to have the same problem with this one. It has been nerfed. You only get a max of 12% now, and it was 20%, so it's exactly the same nerf as Dizzying Tumble. Probably still second on the list, but you know, second on the list of swift transference, because of, you know, the very, very large amount of movement abilities that we already have. You know, this is just an augment to one of them that we won't be using all that much, but particularly good for kiting, I would say. But yeah, it's been nerfed by 1% at the level 2 Conduit and up. Not really much of a difference. Not really that exciting. You could say that about a lot of Conduits for Brewmaster. Lingering Numbness had a bit of a decimal point issue. You know, reducing a target's movement speed by a base of 380% sounds pretty strong. In fact, I don't even know how that would work. I mean, would they go backwards? Would their legs fall off? I'm not sure. Do they get paralyzed before they're paralyzed? In any case, you know, it only starts at 380%. It goes up to 874%. This is the kind of thing I would love to see go live. It's like in PvP, you just paralyze someone and that's it. They're out of the contest. They're not even fighting anymore. They're just stuck there forever. They'll probably still be in the battleground next week, still paralyzed. Of course, it's not going to go live like that, and it was a data mining error, but it was very entertaining. Just move the decimal point to the left, and you can see that Lingering Numbness, the initial application is going to be a lot smaller than it initially was. At 60%, it's going to be 38% instead. It does kind of level out towards the end, though, so yeah, it's still not a talent that I would take for a PvE Brewmaster anyway. But yeah, it was fun seeing those numbers and sort of going, okay, that doesn't go live. Evasive Stride took a hit, but a very, very minor one, you know, 0.2% per Conduit level. It's still easily the best endurance Conduit that we have, as long as you are in Red Stagger, so this will still be your number 1 endurance Conduit. There's not a lot to look at here. It's a very, very minor nerf. Okay, so this is one of my favourites, because Celestialeffervescence, for those of you who know, wasn't actually a very good Conduit to start with, and they've actually nerfed it. Because reasons, you know, it is slightly buffed towards the end, but for some reason the initial few levels, they've really taken it down. The first 11 levels are now weaker than they were, so it's even less likely that people are going to take this. I'm not sure what they were aiming for here, or where they're getting their data from, but that's clever. That's good. That's good. At least it makes you know, other choices easier. So these are the general endurance conduits that have actually had buffs. They have been improved, and the reason they needed to be improved was because they were pretty awful. Unfortunately, buffing awful still makes them awful, just slightly less awful than before. The grounding breath one is the one where you cast Vivify on yourself and your healing is increased, and it has a 30% chance to refund its cost. Now, as I've noted here, if you are tanking and you need to be casting Vivified, stay up, you need to have a chat with your healer if they're still alive. So, I mean, that would be one situation where it might be useful, but it's pretty niche, and no. Fortifying ingredients. Fortifying brew grants you shield equal now to 10% at level 1 conduit of your maximum health for 15 seconds. So I did a bit of basic napkin math on this, and I copied across my monk and all current gear. You know, it's not spectacularly geared by any means, it's slightly over 100 eye level on the PTR, and the health is 26,620. So essentially at the base level this would be a 2,500 health shield every 3.5 to 4 minutes, depending on how much you've reduced the cooldown of Fortifying Brew by. In comparison, Celestial Brew on the same monk is over 5,500 as a shield every minute, which is reducible to around 30 seconds. So you can see that comparatively, you know, fortifying ingredients, it's not very good for us. It's good for other specs who have a greatly reduced cooldown on their fortifying brew, but for us it's just a no-go. It's a no. So Harm Denial is currently my second choice for Endurance Conduit, and it got a buff, which is rather nice. It starts out slowly and sort of builds its way up towards the end. The maximum value now is 48%. So, you know, that's pretty decent. If you're ever in a situation where you did need additional healing, then, you know, Harm Denial actually becomes quite a good option. Particularly, you know, if you have multiple of these orbs out all at the same time and they're all getting 48%, I mean, even at 20%, that's half decent. And you know, we don't have a lot of self-healing apart from maybe hard-casting Vivify and hoping Celestial Fortune procs. So that's very encouraging, and it does kind of give us like a healing option as opposed to the third potency. You know, at the moment there's a debate going on in my mind and other people's minds about, you know, whether or not we're going to go 3 potency conduits just to buff up what damage that we have, and just the 1 endurance, which would be evasive stride, or whether you would take 2 potency conduits, namely Scalding Brew and whatever your Covenant ability is. For me that would be Way of the Fae, and then 2 endurance ones, so you take evasive stride and possibly Harm Denial, just depending on how you're feeling. And the second component to this is Walk with the Ox. Walk with the Ox is basically the third potency conduit that you might possibly want to take. Basically, as long as you are continuing to keep shuffle up, you will reduce the cooldown of Invoke Nizao the Black Ox, which is your 3-minute cooldown. He comes out, he does a little charge, and he just nudges with his horns. It's cute. He doesn't do a lot of damage at low stagger levels, but he is far more potent at higher stagger levels. Nizao Stomp, dealing additional 20% damage at base. As you can see, the power increase with the conduit increase is identical to Harm Denial, so I don't know if that's intended or not, but it does make for an interesting choice. You know, now if you do need that little bit extra additional healing, you can go with Harm Denial, but you know, if you want the damage option, you know, the further you go into stagger, the higher you go, the more you're going to get out of this cooldown. Yeah, you know, a 48% additional stomp damage, it might be good. It just depends really on how you're feeling, whether you feel you need additional damage or where you feel safe enough with your tanking, with like your tank build and the damage that you're taking, and you're not a liability to your healers or your group. Generally tanks then go towards damage, just because more damage, more threats, and the more damage you do, the faster the boss will go down. But it does make for an interesting choice, and you know, we're all about meaningful choices these days. So there's one. Oh boy, we moved to the Covenant change, which was Faeline Stomp. Now, for those of you who've been following, you know, just the general trend of how the Covenants are going for Brewmaster, Night Fae are currently at the back. They took a hit to their conduit, Way of the Fae, a couple of weeks ago, which made it even weaker in comparison to the other Covenant abilities. So we did get an announcement from Blizzard saying, well, you know, we're taking a look at Faeline Stomp and we're going to increase the damage component. We got all excited, and then it turns out that that additional damage component, which is like a dot, like a Faeline Consecrate, it's actually going to Windwalkers. It's not going to Brewmasters. What we got was a little different. So, you know, the nature damage component is still the same, but now we send out a heal to up to 5 allies within 30 yards. It's slightly less potent healing than, you know, the damage value of Faeline Stomp, and it's relatively small, and still adding Breath of Fire to targets. Now that's nice as well, but, you know, Breath of Fire, as we've gone over several times, is not doing an awful lot of damage at the moment and desperately needs to be buffed. Now we move on to the less things. So, as I've already mentioned, Windwalker gets the damage effect, which is quite potent. It's actually the dot is more than the actual application of it, you know. But they've put in an AoE cap for Faeline Stomp now, so it only hits 5 targets. Now, if you've seen this thing on the beta, you know how big the Faeline Stomp tree goes out. And I have my own opinions on the AoE cap, which are not repeatable here. Suffice to say that we already have 2 AoE capped abilities in Rushing Jadewind, if you take it as a talent, and you probably should be, and Spinning Crane Kick. And now to take our Covenant ability as well, which already wasn't performing that well, and put an AoE cap on it is just silly. It's very silly. Suffice it to say, I'm not very pleased with this. You know, everyone's going, well, it's a buff because you got a heal, but the heal is tiny. It wasn't needed or requested. We would have preferred the damage, because damage is a real issue for us at the moment, and then you AoE capped it. So yeah. not happy at all. So, you know, from looking at that, there wasn't an awful lot of good news for us really in this beta build. We got some buffs to conduits we'd never ever take. We got some nerfs to conduits that we would also never ever take. Yeah, I don't know why you'd take the 4th place Covenant and make it even weaker. Why would you do that? Anyway, it's not time to abandon all hope just yet. I mean, they are obviously in a bit of a rush to get everything out there. I mean, our component of the beta patch was relatively small, but, you know, there were a good 8 other classes that got blue posts and class changes. So they're still doing an awful lot of that. They're changing Covenant abilities, they're changing class talents, you know, them still messing around with the conduits, as we've just found out. And that's probably because they've been set this arbitrary launch date of October the 27th, and they're desperately trying to fill it, and that's probably why they split the dev team, so one team can work on the PTR and the other team can continue to make changes all the way up to launch date. But it all seems a bit rushed and chaotic and difficult to test because it only just comes out. So even if you give feedback, it's probably too late anyway. They don't have time to change it. We still need a tank damage pass, and I still seriously hope we get one. Whether we do or not is another matter. You know, at the end of the day, we're still an excellent tank. Still going to be in demand. We're not going to have a problem finding groups for anything. And if all else fails, you know, we've got our brews with us, so, you know, we can just sit down on top of the keg and get absolutely shellackered. So yes, that's it. That's your lot. No doubt we will get another beta update next week. And we will be very close to pre-patch now, unless they plan to, you know, release pre-patch a week before launch. They can't really go much later than October the 6th because of all of the pre-patch content that they've created. It's got to fit in somehow. So yes, interesting times, but it does very much look like we're going to have quite a few more beta passes before the big show begins. So, you know, hang in there. I mean, while you know, this wasn't a particularly good week for us, it doesn't mean that everything is going to be absolutely terrible. I've got to keep the faith and know that the Night Fae are going to come through. and they're going to be the best covenant, and everyone's going to change to us, and we're all going to soul shape together and skip off into the distance, or something. Anyway, I am the conspicuous Moo, and I bid you adieu.